morning. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Treaty 6 territory and would like to acknowledge the Métis people who share a deep connection with this land. And today I'm joined by Matt Osborne, the president of the Alberta Professional Firefighters and Paramedics Association. Last week, the UCP government introduced Bill 9, the Red Tape Reduction Statutes Amendment Act. As part of that omnibus bill, the bill will provide presumptive workers' compensation coverage for firefighters who develop certain occupational cancers because of the fighting of the 2016 Horse River wildfire in Fort McMurray. It does that by removing the current latency periods, also described as the number of years that a firefighter has been on the job. And this is needed because the firefighters who fought that wildfire experienced a career's worth of exposure to toxic elements within just a few weeks during a time when they had the limited ability to decontaminate. Now, I have been advocating for complete coverage since last year, have raised it in the legislature a number of times, and unfortunately, what the UCP have brought forward fails to meet the needs of firefighters on a number of fronts. First, it does not retroactively cover those who have already been diagnosed with cancer, applied to the WCB, and been denied support and help for their recovery. And this includes firefighters who are currently battling cancer and families who have lost loved ones. This bill also fails to add in a broader range of cancers or acknowledge respiratory illness that firefighters who fought in Fort McMurray are already seeing develop. Currently, firefighters needs to have been on the job for 5 years to receive WCB coverage for a cancer like primary leukemia. But some cancers require 25 years on the job to qualify for existing presumptive coverage. We have been advocating for complete coverage, and that means 3 things. Remove the latency period on the currently covered cancers for the firefighters who are on the ground in the Horse River wildfire, acknowledging the unique and catastrophic nature of fighting the wildfire that was termed the Beast. Second, expand the covered cancers based on the latest research. I was very proud as the Labour Minister to ensure that Alberta had the best coverage in the country. Now, many provinces have surpassed us, updating the coverage based on the latest science, and Alberta workers are being left behind. Third, we should be adding in respiratory illness to reflect new science and research, including a study led by Dr. Nicola Cherry, published in September of 2021, that studied 1,200 responders specific to this event. Dr. Cherry's study showed that firefighters who participated in the Fort McMurray wildfire developed ongoing respiratory issues with, and I quote, reduced diffusing capacity, new onset asthma, and hyperactivity with bronchial wall thickening in those deployed. Without a thought for their own well-being and without hesitation, firefighters put themselves in danger to protect the people and the city of Fort McMurray. These heroes worked long hours with limited rest, and in some cases, no access to breathing filters or self-contained breathing apparatus. Firefighters who participated in that fire are already seeing increased rates of cancer and respiratory disease, and the last thing that they need, or that their families need, is to have to worry about whether they will have WCB coverage or not, whether they're going to have to appeal a rejection. I want to note that firefighters who are left out of this bill become ineligible for the Heroes Fund. And that Heroes Fund provides one-time tax-free payment of $100,000 to eligible families to recognize the noble service of first responders while providing support to grieving families. So that brings us to why we are here today. Bill 9 in its current form is flawed, and it fails to address the 3 concerns that firefighters have been asking for. That's why I will be bringing an amendment to Bill 9 to make the changes in Bill 9 retroactive. It should include the firefighters who have developed occupational cancer in the last 6 years since the Fort McMurray fire. If I could, I would also bring forward a comprehensive amendment, but only the government has the ability to address the qualifying cancers through the primary site cancer regulation, or to include respiratory illness. Concerning Dr. Cherry's study, I certainly urge the government to consider expanding WC coverage to include the broader range of cancers and including respiratory disease. Alberta firefighters regularly risk their lives to protect us, and it is our job to protect them and to get them the help and the support they are owed. Now, I also want to say this. There is an election coming, and if the current government fails to take our concerns seriously and to listen to firefighters, accepting our amendment and providing the additional enhancements I've spoken about here today, a future NDP government has every intention of correcting their mistake if we are given that opportunity by Albertans in May. Thank you, and I'd like to turn things over to Matt Osborne, the president of the APFFPA.
Thank you, Christina. We greatly appreciate the work that the provincial government has done so far to address the crucial issue for Alberta firefighters and their families. But the bill in its current form does not retroactively cover firefighters who sadly already have cancer after battling this catastrophic event. Some of the firefighters who worked to contain the Fort McMurray wildfire were exposed to a career's worth of toxins in just a couple of weeks, as hundreds of buildings containing resins, plastics, and toxins all burned simultaneously, filling the air with hazardous chemicals and carcinogens. Because of the unprecedented response required to battle that massive fire, firefighters soon ran out of breathing air tanks, which increased the toxic exposures. Firefighters are proud to serve our communities across Alberta. That's why it's important that hundreds of firefighters who did need to respond to the Fort McMurray wildfire have access to health coverages and cancer coverages. It is difficult enough when you're battling cancer, and then at the same time, you also need to prove a WCB claim to look after you and your family, and you know your cancer is related to battling a catastrophic event, a fire in 2016. It's a choice to do the work we do, and we're proud to do it. But it's very difficult when we have a firefighter die from one of the many occupational cancers, and then their family has to battle through red tape to receive the compensation they wish they didn't actually deserve. Right now, the family of a young firefighter who died from cancer in 2018 following the toxic exposures in Fort McMurray is still negotiating with WCB to receive compensation. Alberta is leading the country by taking this step to establish coverages for responders that battled a catastrophic event like Fort McMurray wildfire. We just want to ensure the firefighters that already have cancer are equally covered. We are grateful for the attention that MLA Christina Gray has brought to this issue, and we urge all MLAs to please stand together and support this critical amendment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt, for all the advocacy work you are doing on behalf of your members and the responders in Fort McMurray. So I look forward to proposing the amendment. I hope that the UCP will stand with us, showing compassion for the heroes and their families who deserve the full support of the Alberta government, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Just a reminder that if you're on Zoom, it's the raise hand function. If you're on the phone, it's *9 to get in the question queue. We'll start with questions in the room.
Safe Kaiser Global News. I was wondering for Matt Osborne, initially when the government proposed this, your organization was on board, and if I recall correctly in a statement, you were quoted as saying that you support this. I'm just wondering what's changed between that last week and now.
We do support this. Like I said, Alberta is leading by establishing this kind of coverage for a large catastrophic event. But when we learned more about the legislation, it was confirmed that retroactive coverage for firefighters who have already been battling cancer and with WCB claims, that we felt that an amendment to this bill to make it better and to make sure that those firefighters are covered that are already in WCB process or have been denied. We need, I want to make it clear that this is a big step forward, and this is leading our nation. So to make it even better, we need to make sure that that firefighters are already battling cancer, and these issues are looked after equally.
And have you proposed this to the government? If so, what have those conversations looked like?
Very open. I have to say that one thing about firefighters, we are so proud to do the work in our communities, and we're right across Alberta. We're proud to respond on big events like this. And one thing's for sure, right across party lines in this province, Minister Jean, MLA Gray, everybody's very open to be able to talk. So we are opening up. We just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that this bill is amended. And I know we've worked with MLA Gray for years, and we're working with Minister Jean and all the MLAs in government, and making sure that everybody's aware of this issue so we can get the support to make this even better.
And I'll break the rules there, Don, and ask a third question. I'm just wondering, how many people do you think this actually affects, the retroactive coverage?
This is the hard part for us because we unfortunately don't have access to that kind of information. Right now, there is no registry to tell us exactly how many firefighters have cancer and where they are in a process with WCB or otherwise. So we go by as firefighters come to us and tell what's going on, and then we try to work and advocate. We're being told by Minister Jean's office and everything that WCB is reporting some numbers that aren't tremendously high, but we'd like to work with government and make sure that if it's a small group, if it's people that we don't even know about, that's unfortunately from our perspective, we don't have that information. So we want to make sure that this bill is whole, inclusive, and make sure that it captures everybody.
Thank you. We'll just go to the phones now. Please just state who you'd like to direct your question to. Catherine, your line is open.
Alberta today. I think this question will be for Christina. So off the top of the remarks at the news conference, Minister Jean had said that this takes, that this presumptive coverage would be for any diagnosis on or after royal assent.
Yes.
But then we were kind of asking about that, like, is this retroactive? And it almost made it sound like it said no, it's for anybody who gets the cancer. Do you think, I don't know if you've had any conversations with the government, but do you think this was just perhaps an oversight and they're willing to change the legislation, or was this intentionally made to be so it comes into effect upon royal assent?
Thank you so much for the question, and you've described it exactly. Bill 9 and the coverage for occupational cancers really only starts on proclamation of that bill. And we know the Fort McMurray wildfire was 6 years ago. And since then, we've heard stories from firefighters who not only have received cancer diagnosis, but because they failed to qualify for the latency period or how long they've been firefighters on the job, have been denied coverage. So we're aware of a group of firefighters that Bill 9 is not going to adequately support. Now, in the drafting of the bill, why the government put this into effect on proclamation, I could not say. For WCB coverage and changes to WCB coverage, it does typically happen on a go-forward basis. But we are talking today about a catastrophic event that occurred starting in 2016. And so for the coverage for this and to support this group of responders, we need to make sure that it goes backwards to that 2016 time, both because we know there are firefighters who have been denied and because it makes common sense that if we're removing the latency periods, it could be for someone who was diagnosed with cancer last year. And those heroes deserve that coverage as well. I hope to be able to work productively with the government to implement this change. And then I'd also like to see the government expand the list of presumptive coverages, as well as including respiratory illnesses in the consideration of what firefighters and responders in Fort McMurray experienced.
Thank you, Catherine. Do you have another follow-up? Yeah, go ahead.
I do have a follow-up. Speaking of expansion, so this particular bill is solely on the Fort McMurray wildfire, And while we hope it's the last of this kind, it's entirely possible there will be another catastrophic fire where there's either a large number of houses or something of this magnitude. Um, should you form government, would you be willing to introduce legislation that covers off any future catastrophic fires, so we wouldn't have to do legislative amendments every single time there is one?
Thank you for the question. And so, I mean, today the government has chosen to acknowledge a specific catastrophic event, and I certainly hope that we don't see another like this in our province, but we can't guarantee that. I can't speak specifically to a future NDP government policy as to whether this should be made more generic, but certainly if we see the need for this type of legislation more than once, that would be a consideration for any future government.
Thank you, Catherine. We'll go to the next caller. Michelle, your line is open.
Oh, hi, it's Michelle Belfontaine from CBC. A question, I guess it would be for Matt. The expansion to respiratory illnesses, you said earlier that the government appears to be open to retroactive coverage. But would it include respiratory illnesses that you guys talked about, or would it be just the cancer side of it?
Right now, what we're doing right now, and this is what I tend to say, is that it's a very large step that Alberta is leading with right now. And Alberta is, nowhere else in Canada is there catastrophic traumatic exposure coverage. And so we are creating. So this first step that government was able to work with and attach to the firefighter cancers, we saw that to expand. It was a part of our discussion definitely with respiratory. It was a part of our discussion to include other cancers that we're seeing across other provinces. But we really appreciate this first step, and then that's what I'm finding this amendment process with, is that to make this bill as strong as possible, is there a better, can we learn more through more discussion and add in can we add in that retroactivity? Are there other cancer opportunities to add in from other provinces already covering that Alberta doesn't currently cover, and respiratory? Because what that'll do is it'll empower WCB to support those responders. And so all of our discussions, and this is why we are humbled as firefighters, we're proud to serve our communities, and we are openly talking to ministers and MLAs, and they are very positive discussions, and we're optimistic.
Do you have a follow-up, Michelle?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll just do one more pass for questions. Just a reminder, if you're on Zoom, it's the raise hand function. If you're on the phone, it's *9. Seeing none, that concludes our press conference for today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.